morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the 17th SHB. Wow. Believe it or not, I know, wow. I have a few things to say to start. As I'm starting, people on the first session, if you have slides, get them on the room laptop. I have a USB stick for you to use, and it is say, or use your own USB stick. And so this is the laptop for the session, for the conference. Anytime during the day, feel free to put your talk up there. Welcome old friends, welcome new people. It's nice to see everybody here. The first couple of years of SHB were at MIT, and we had a room that was smaller than we needed. The idea was that people would have to move because you have to go up on stage and come back in a different spot. We didn't quite achieve that here, but it is still pretty tight. So it's cozy. We'll see how the air conditioner works. The goal of this workshop has always been to be radically interdisciplinary. So there's a lot of different people here and all sorts of different disciplines. And to make that work, the format, which those of you old know, there are 4 sessions a day, 6 or 7 people on a session, 90 minutes each. Everyone has 8 minutes to speak, no more, and we will try to be kind of annoying about that, right? Instead, don't be that person when it says time's up and said, oh, I can finish up my last 4 slides quickly. That is not the way we do it. And then the rest of it will be questions and comments. It is a day that moves fast. There's no time to read your email. Sorry about that. Again, if you have slides, we'll use the room computer. In the first bunch of years, Matt Blaze used to record these. People know that. The recordings are still around. Frank is now also playing with audio, so he has a recorder set up. If you don't want to be recorded, just say so. No harm, no foul. We're happy either way. But so the default will be the recorder will be on. Wireless is the card on your table. How to get to the Harvard Wireless. Sorry?
There's also Edge Room.
All right, and that works. This is a working office, so during the day, if you're walking around, please don't be loud. It'll be easier tomorrow because it'll be an off-site for the Ash Center, which we're not going to, so it'll be a lot more empty. Bathrooms are over there by the elevators. It's going to be an annoying thing with the door, which they want locked, we want open. If you leave, prop the door open, close it when you come back. Things fail, wave from over there. We'll work on it. So you saw Brett. Also, please bus yourself, so we don't have good. The more you can keep this place clean, the happier everyone will be. Lunches are here. They'll be out there, and again, we can eat in here or out there in the common area. Today during lunch, if we could all come back here, and we're going to try to have a remembrance session for Ross Anderson, who all you know passed away unexpectedly a couple months ago. Dinner tonight is at a fine restaurant, and it is about a half-hour walk or an Uber. And we'll open. We have a whole restaurant. I think 6 o'clock we'll sort of be there for drinks and walk around apps. We'll sit down at 6:45. Hopefully we'll get to sleep at a good time tonight. Wednesday after the sessions, there's a reception at my house, which you are all welcome to. And I want a quick show of hands of who thinks they'll come tomorrow night. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, good. That is not binding. All right, you're free not to come if you don't want to. You're free to come if you didn't. Just wanted a quick show of hands for ordering things. Other logistics, I think that's everything. You think of anything? Mm-hmm. All right, so will the first session please come up? I will moderate the first session. I have these extremely high-tech cards. Yeah, just feel free to grab a seat. No. So Susan reminded me, Ross used to live blog this. If anybody feels like taking detailed notes, on all the sessions. That'd be kind of neat.
Do you still use adoptive?
Okay, I will.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Where's the USB stick?
I was like,
Who has the room USB stick?
I'm almost always first, except for
You do.
Andrew Adams.
USB.
Yeah,
Oh, you want to put this on or not?
I'm not the first, right? So
I'm the first.
yeah, you need a stick.
So I have this plugged in. So that.
Done. All right, Bonnie, you are going to.
We ready?
We are. You know, if we're not ready, we're never going to be ready.
All right. Well, good morning. Today I'm going to talk about using neuroscience to improve the usability of security. First, I have a little tangent, and this is what I actually have posted on the website about me. And this is more for lunch and other meal discussions if you guys have some good ideas for me about women in cybersecurity. That the discouraging research is I've spent 20 plus years trying to get more women in the field. Too few are entering in spite of everybody's efforts. And we have some things we've done for that. But once they enter, then they're treated poorly. So they are harassed, they're undervalued, they're underpromoted, they're underpaid. So if we collectively can do our best to not only help them get into the field, but to help them want to stay in the field, that would be nice. Okay, so back to the topic that some of you have heard us present. So I say us because Tony here is also on this slide. You may have seen some shuffling in where we are over the years. We have the same people, but we've gone different places, some of us. And we have some updates on what we've talked about before. So to get you up to speed quickly, remember when we looked like that? And we had brains. And you...
right in a good position, right underneath your picture.
Sweet! Imagine we brought our brains today. And you'll get to see Bruce's tomorrow. If you're lucky. So there are some of us, our university did a spotlight on us, so they took a nice photo a few years ago. So we do some brain research on computer security, and the main goal is to make it easier for us to behave securely. Not us, but all users, and using neurophysiological tools. So it's not just that users are dumb or lazy. It's that our brains are trying to behave optimally using the fewest amount of resources. And if we can use tools to figure out why our brains are doing the things they are, we can design software to optimize that, right? So computer security becomes more intuitive. That's the goal. So habituation's a problem. That's where we're tuning things out, and we habituate to the warnings within a day or even across days. We've presented this in prior years, so that's why I'm kind of just the recap, right? If this is Netflix, this is the recap. And there are some regions of the brain, and we can see that we pay less attention the more times we've seen these security messages. So, here are some of those security warnings. The more times we see them, our brain blurs them out. So we're looking at things that are not security warnings. So we have these innocuous notifications. Do those generalize? So if we see something that's just a friendly update for us, does our brain lump that into, oh no, security warning? Does that cause us problems? And if so, is there a way that we can help our brains distinguish between, hey, friendly reminder, compared to, oh no, security warning? And so we ended up doing 3 experiments. We did a field experiment online, and then an fMRI experiment, and then we needed to do one more field experiment. So the first one, we measured warning disregard reaction time, and we tested visual appearance. So basically, we were testing visual appearance and thinking that things, friendly reminders, these notifications that look visually similar to security warnings, we think those will cause more of a problem. And this is a little reminder. I think we talked about this before, that you see we've got this little, our scenario is this Batman thing, and we have this ongoing kind of reminder, here's your progress, and it looks kind of similar to a thing that could be a security warning. Hey, do you want us to overreach in this security setting? So because this notification, and I'm sorry, my little pointer here doesn't have a laser pointer. Looks like that notification or warning, those can blur together. So yes, that can cause more of a problem. And then, so when you see neural, that's when we're doing fMRI. That's when we're watching brain activity. And so we're trying to test mode of interaction. So we already know visually similar is going to cause a problem. What if we changed mode of interaction? Is that going to cause enough difference for our brains to tell that apart? And could we go a different way? Is that going to help our brains distinguish? So, and if we have more of a visual distinction. So I've kind of thrown in here from a paper, and this is very close to being done, right, Tony?
It has to be done. We have a deadline.
July 13th is when our next revision is due. And some of you may read that, hopefully soon. So we're testing ones that look more similar and they get more important. And then we call this the Pittsburgh duck just because this picture was taken there along the Allegheny, I believe, right? Not Monongahela. Yeah. So, and we changed the text there just to amuse ourselves. You're doing great. And then the way to click it away is you have to acknowledge, yes, I am doing great. So what we were able to check is the generalization. And so the more times you see these similar messages, and again, they're just friendly things, does that generalize? Do we start tuning out important security messages based on friendly messages? And does it happen more if it looks more similar? And we can see, yes, things that are more similar cause more problems. And I'm just going to keep going a little bit here because I know time is of the essence. Notifications generalizes to security, and the closer the visual similarity causes more of a problem, and the duck there is it's not due to fatigue. So the further questions were, so can we change the mode of interaction? Will that reduce the generalization? But the key on that is when we change the mode of interaction, does that change inherently the visual similarity? And then, doesn't that just conflate the two? So what we wanted to do is see, can we hold, can you change the mode of interaction without changing the visual appearance? And that seems impossible. Well, we tried, because we did this initial study, fMRI, those looked so visually different, right? Which is being tested, the mode of interaction or the visual appearance? So we tried to do our best to have the best of both worlds. And you guys can decide if that looks similar enough that it's still visually the same while changing the mode of interaction. And we were able to see that, yes, with our, if you say that the visual appearance remains the same, but yet the mode of interaction is different, then we were able to do that in that case. So takeaways are, yes, they do generalize. We need to be careful that if we can reduce the number of friendly notifications that confuse our brains, that cause us to behave less securely, then that's better. Changing the mode of interaction can reduce this generalization of habituation. If we can change that, then that kind of resets our brain so we are less likely to confuse friendly notifications with important security notifications. Under time. There you go.
So I'm Nancy Blackburn from the University of Utah. So I'm going to talk about how do we teach security and privacy educational game design and development in higher education. So first, let's define what a serious game is. So a serious game is made with a purpose beyond just entertainment. There's multiple objectives, educational, which I'll talk mostly about today, but there's also like psychotherapy games, empathy games, extra games, if you ever played like Dance, right? Extra games there. And then there's also different subject domains. So in educational, we can do math, we can do typing, what we care about here, right? Security and privacy. Whereas like the psychotherapy could be about phobias or cognitive behavioral theory. So So we've got our objectives, educational awareness, subject domains, security and privacy that we care about today. There are several security and privacy serious games, and they've got proven effectiveness for helping to educate on these topics, raise awareness, increase interest in the field, although some of the increased interest isn't really educational, they're more just for fun, and then people can go in and see what this is all about. However, designing educational games isn't a straightforward process, or serious games either. You're combining these serious topics within gameplay, and a lot of times they'll be derogatively labeled as chocolate-covered broccoli, where you're trying to integrate this intrinsically motivating candy with these intrinsically healthy, good-for-you foods, right? So candy being the gameplay, and then the broccoli being the serious topic of your security and privacy. And so sometimes these games get dismissed out of hand, even if they have this proven effectiveness. So how do we teach new budding game developers how to make these games so that they can foster innovation and enrich educational experiences? And there is work showing that these security and privacy serious games are useful in kind of supplementing the education in university. So what I chose to do was create use the game jam to introduce students to the iterative game development process. So game jam is a bunch of people that just kind of come together and you quickly create a game. And it's a very intense, short game development cycle. In industry, game development takes years. You do it in days or weeks in this case. And the sequence of how these usually work is you introduce a theme or a subject. So this would be security and privacy. And then the objective would be education. The second step is you then allow the teams to form and do brainstorming for their design of the game. And then they get thrown to the wolves and they gotta rapidly create these games. Afterwards, we all come back together and you analyze the game. So that's the game jam. So in 2 courses that I teach, one for graduate students in a professional program, it's gameplay programming, and then for the undergrads, alternative game development, where alternative game development is just a broader category for serious games. And then we do it in a 4 to 5 week module. So this game jam fits within the curriculum of the already developed course. So first, introduction. For the game jam, right, we got to introduce the students to the topic, so security and privacy. Informally, I asked the students if they even know what I'm talking about. And I always get a couple hands since it's a games program, technology is involved. And so there's always some people interested in that. Cheating's a big deal in online gaming, right? And that's and then also like discrimination and privacy issues come up there too. So we talk a lot about that. Everyone reads Bruce's articles, introducing them to the topics in general. So then the next step, since these are new developers, I introduce them to 2 serious game development tools. One of them is one that I developed myself, which is Ogres, which we talked about, objective educational games. And then we have the game rationale, why are we making it a game? Which is, we talked about like the intrinsic motivation, engagement. Also, we learn through play. We're mammals, right? And mammals play to learn. And then we have enforced constraints. I make them make a PC game or a web-based game. And then our subject, which is security and privacy. And then I have them use a 1-page design doc in our program. They're usually familiar with what that means. It's just a high-level concept of what the game is. And I have them put the Ogres definition inside that one-page design doc, and then pitch it to the class to form teams. They're allowed to choose whatever game engine they want. It gives them a lot of autonomy over the project, a lot of ownership. Then they have 2 weeks to iterate on it. Then we come back, we evaluate it using the educational game design assessment tool, which is a tool my team created and then validated through assessing educational games. And then they choose 2 things based on assessments from their peers, so their peers evaluate their games. So they choose 2 things to change, and they iterate on it. They have 2 weeks. They come back, we reevaluate, and then we compare scores. And it's a really messy process, and it's not about making a game to publish. It's about learning this process. A lot of times we say in game development, prototypes are throwaway code anyway, and you don't make a game in 4 weeks. It takes a long time. So what's fun about this is for their final project, students will choose sometimes to iterate on these games even further, showing that they find this interesting, they owned up to what they were making, and really enjoyed that. So again, it's not about the process of making, or it's not about making a game, it's about learning the process of integrating these serious, important concepts into the games. Yeah, we can just go play some games. I got some good ones.
Next. All right. So this is.
I emailed you.
I think it's on here.
Are you able to bring it up? Great.
All right, let's see if we can get it. Which one are you likely to be? This one, I think.
Should be it.
Yeah, you say that now.
Did it email you? I have it as Google Slides.
I know, it was a whole Google thing. I had to log into Google and
You're not able to.
I did download a thing with a PDF with a.
Can we go to someone else? And
Can
I
we go to someone else and-
send you a note?
All right,
or a
send me an actual file. Don't send me a
Yes.
Google thing.
Yes.
There's been a request in the back if you could stand while you talk, if you don't mind.
Yes, absolutely. Should I be next? Because
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Fine, speech. So, how I move to the next slide? I just like stand here and
Then we use a.
So
How'd you
I
do,
used
Bonnie?
mine, but there was only one slot, so I took this out. But I'm happy for you to use this.
We have another thing though.
That one was not working for me, so you're invited to use this one.
thank you.
Right.
Wow, okay, that's cool.
Go.
I did not copy the presentation from the stick, so hopefully
It's hopefully it's good.
yeah, could work.
All right.
We'll see how much you're gonna see.
I need to put his on, so go.
Okay. I'm Jonas from Ruhr University in Bochum. I'm currently a PhD student, but I want to hand in my thesis in 6 weeks, hopefully, so we'll see. So just a little thing, everyone you see on this picture is from Bochum, and everyone is doing human-centered security in some regards. So we're quite a big team in Bochum, so I would be happy if you visit us, because there's a lot going on, and like we have 4 faculties now and a lot of PhD students, so it's quite cool. The title you see there, that's the title of my PhD thesis, and what I brought you today is like a little project which will be part of my thesis, or which we already published. So the guiding thing in the guiding research question in my PhD thesis is, what is human-centered security in organizational practice? And the reason why I asked this is because, I mean, I'm new to the field, but scholars in the last decades in our field have made big progress. They developed a lot of theories, a lot of ideas how to look on employees, how to look on humans, how to handle them. And I was interested to checking how this knowledge from us scholars really translate to the practice in organization. I'm not talking about like developers who develop software for end users. I'm talking about the human-centered security in organizations targeting, for example, employees, which is a subfield of human-centered security. And so a subsequent question that arose was like, who is responsible for HCS in organizations? So who do we need to study to understand how HCS looks in organizations? And there are different answers to this. So you could, for example, look at regulators who write something about how employees should be trained. You could, of course, and we did this, look at the leadership of an organization. You could look at the different security stakeholders, red teams, blue teams, the network operations centers who have like a helpline or so, or you could look at the people who do security awareness in bigger organizations. And we kind of like did everything, but today I want to talk about Chief Information Security Officers and the content of this paper, which reads, or the paper title is, Employees Who Don't Accept the Time Security Takes Are Not Aware Enough, the CISO View of Human-Centered Security. And Simon, actually, who's also up here, was a co-author of this paper. So what we did there back in 2021 and 2022, we followed a group of 30 Chief Information Security Officers who had all basic interests together to talk about human-centered security over 1.5 years. In this paper, we only analyzed the first 8 months. If this is, by the way, a mistake, it's 5 half-day workshops. So we met with them 5 days over 8 months. We also had additional interviews and communication in the meantime. And it was a lot of work, obviously, because they discussed among each other. We brought in some knowledge, we got feedback, and so on. It was really a demanding research, but I think it was worth it because, like, this was the first time that someone asked how CISOs look on this topic. And yeah, this is what I want to talk about today. What are our findings? First of all, we got like I would say like creme de la creme of participants because every CISO who participated was invited based on the idea to talk about human-centered security. So all our results are a little bit like, moved towards this. There might be a lot of CISOs out there who don't have any interest in human-centered security. All the people there, all the CISOs have some interest. So what did we find? For the majority of CISOs, human-centered security basically means what is available on the market, and this is security awareness and training. But as most of us know, human-centered security is more than awareness and training. It's considering employees' constraints. It's considering their psychology. It's considering their surroundings. CISOs were especially interested in this thing called simulated phishing attack. Maybe you know what this is. It's a big market. I mean, KnowBe4, for example, they are worth 4.5 billion US dollars, and they basically make their money with phishing simulation and training. And SoSafe, a big German company, they're also worth a lot. And so it's a big thing. And the CISOs, they were very open that they don't see that this will bring any security advantage, but they needed the numbers generated from the simulations to present to their managers to say that we're doing something for our employees. But they were very open with, I don't know whether this is a good thing. So, and then some showed, not all, but some showed a general interest, and this was what they're hoping for from this gathering, that they would learn about, we would bring in techniques, how they could easily change employees' behavior. So we tried to talk about limitations of employees, but they were tell us about nudging, tell us about how to control with dark patterns most likely, but how to control the employees. And then also this, if you speak English in the United States, business is a common word, but if you speak, this was like a German-speaking thing because they were from Switzerland, and if you say business when you speak German and you say business, it means something different. So they were really, business is important. It's on top of our mind, but they did not consider that employees are contributing to this business and that they have constraints themselves. So employees' constraints were not what they thought about in their job. And then also they were looking for checklists that they could use. And also super important, and there is another paper who also confirms this, CISOs actively say this is what we're doing is craftsmanship. It's not science. So keep away the science, okay? Which is of course bad for us because we are scientists. And okay, before I go to my last slide, I just want to speak about this Dunning-Kruger effect. Maybe you know it. It really explains if you want to become an expert where you stand. And just a small disclaimer: I'm a PhD student, right? And right now I'm there, so I got a little bit of knowledge, and I feel like I know the field now, and it's super easy to criticize all the scholars before me because what I want to say is, why didn't we ask for the incentives? Why CISOs and all the others are not implementing it the way we are? And I think the longer I'm in the field, and I want to stay in the field, the better I will understand why. But what I want to say is we should start to ask for the incentives and not like just blame the CISOs for not implementing our methods. But okay, and then with this, I would hand over to to Simon, who will build on this. All right?
Excellent. You need to be on the.
My slides are on this. They're not corrupt. So if you're in the next session, which I'm chairing, in the break, let's get all your slides on the USB and onto the computer first. Yeah, I'm just trying to make you look bad, Simon.
Thank you.
No problem.
Simon, which one are you?
Parkin. Choose your flavor, PDF, PowerPoint.
Which one? This one?
Any, yeah. Control L.
Control L. Look at you.
Control L.
That's very intuitive, right?
That didn't work.
Like large.
What other things do you have stored in that tray?
I've got about 5 things in there. That's one of them.
All right. Control L.
Full screen PDF. I'm here all week.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about when is security useful enough, and I just realised, me and Jonas have been working together for the last year or two because I guess we had a polite argument in one of the SHBs a few years ago. Academic discourse. All right, so security usability, we can pat ourselves on the back. We've identified user challenges in security. Jonas talked about a few of them. People don't have resources. They don't have enough time. We give them crappy tools. Mental, physical capacity to do security while they're also doing their job. The skills and motivations, so the kind of nudging that Jonas talked about, how to trick people into thinking security is an exciting thing. And also ways to reduce those challenges. So it's we're chipping away at, we can make the security tasks take a little bit less time, things like that. And what I found, not just in the work with Jonas, but in various pieces of work, security prides itself on all these standards. We want to look like a mature field. We've got all these guidelines, stuff like that. It's no more straightforward today for companies to assess whether their security is usable. It seems like we're always starting from square one whenever we work with a company. And then it just kind of bothered me that maybe I'm missing something, but it seems that the amount of security usability we have in a company, it's kind of limited by how much someone wants to spend on it. No, actually, it's not like we're aiming for anything, because usability techniques can chip away at the amount of time, the number of screens you have to click through, whether things work seamlessly, but where are we aiming to be? It seems that's kind of being quietly limited by the budget for usability. And Jonas touched on this, but this user as weakest link narrative just won't go away. And we've seen in more recent work that actually the user does a lot of work contextualizing their training to the work they do. It's like the CISO says, you should act like me and be a security expert, but then if you ask the security expert to know how to do someone else's job, it's like, no, that's not what I do. And I guess what bothers me is that we're kind of solidifying to things like phishing simulations, but also leaning on users. I guess in my teaching as well, it's whenever the students are working on interventions, they're always like, we just need to get the user to realize security is important, or they just need to do more. But I guess I've been in this field long enough as well that I hear that every year. And is that really the level of sophistication we have? Is this where we want to be? It looks like it works, but it doesn't really work. It's kind of, we're tilting, we're betting everything on the user just waking up and going, oh, security's amazing. And also, usable security is a crappy product on the market. We can buy, once there's enough training, it looks like it's doing the trick. But if you invite a usability researcher to do science into a company, they can't really explain what they're doing, they don't know how long it's going to take, and then you get the bill right at the end. And it's, whereas with this, once there's enough training, it's like you just buy a package done. So can we really compete on equal terms to get usability in on those same terms? And pointing back to that point about security has lots of standards, regulations. These regulations are increasingly including that users should be trained. And of course, once you professionalize training, it removes the debate. It's like, well, you just have to do it. So there's no point arguing that it takes too much time, just do it. And so the counter of how much time, how much resource security is taking has just been lost. Because paradoxically, people recognize that there is this human factor. But then, and we've seen this in more recent work, is each user should have a route to a secure work outcome. But we're finding that, having talked to CISOs, training managers and the like, nobody's checking if anything's usable. You kind of buy it in and then it's just there in the company. And yet, this connection that users are making between the rules and their work, it's trivialized. It's like it's not seen as relevant or important. We don't need to look at that because also you just need to do it. And so, just thinking kind of where could we go from this is if we're looking for enough usability, not just more, it's can we get guarantees of secured working into organizations, so into regulations. So it's there's training in regulations now, but we're seeing in the newer work that if a user can't work securely, it's like, oh, we'll just do the training again. Right? It's the one tool we have. Just do the training again. It's because you didn't care enough. If you do the training again and you care more, then you'll be able to do it. And then what is a practicable baseline for security usability? How much do we want to at least? So I'm thinking of the Cyber Essentials standard in the UK that had like a baseline for technical security, yet how do we even define how much you at least need for usable security in an organization? And from experience working with policymakers in the UK is practitioners don't want a thought exercise. They don't want to think, well, how do we help the user? They want a repeatable process. They want steps they can do. Just tell them what to do. And also, to close, like, when are we going to accept that security is a secondary task? Because we've already got this thing that's been hovering around, security culture. I mean, it's already defining itself separate from organizational culture. It's trying to change the priority, so we take any amount of security and say, it's asking more of us. But then we toyed with this over the years when I was working with Angela Sass. How can we make a secondary task NASA TLX? So it's like you've got the astronaut tightening the space screw, but they've also got to enter their password or do 2FA or something. And can we make a behavior scale that's populated for each organization's working environment? That might be nice, because then it's, as I said, it's every time we're having to do this assessment anew, every time we work with a company. So then that's my lot. Thanks.
Marc, do you want to go in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Were you able to get that?
Yes, we think so. No,
Is that the new one?
it's the new one. All right, we'll keep trying.
That's no good.
Send me the non-PDF. Send me the PowerPoint.
Okay.
All right.
Is this the clicker or was it that one?
That's the clicker.
This is the clicker. Okay, amazing.
We'll try to get our clicker working during the break. Otherwise, Bonnie, we're going to use your clicker the entire time.
Good thing we have redundancies, right? 5 options.
And then this one. Oh, awesome. Wait, now I can't go back. Oh. Okay. Hi, my name is Lucy, and I'm presenting this work today in a joint work with a few other people, including Alyssa Redmiles, who's also here. And before I begin, I just wanted to make a brief content warning that I will be making mentions to image-based sexual abuse, but I won't be talking about any specific accounts. Okay, so as many as 8 in 10 adults in the US share intimate content. So sharing intimate content is a very common practice, and intimate content we define as images or videos that show a nude or semi-nude subject, contain intimate body parts, and or intend to arouse. And 1 in 6 US adults in a 2022 study reported having their intimate content distributed without their consent. So this is part of a broad category of abuse called image-based sexual abuse, and this includes things like the non-consensual distribution of intimate content and also the non-consensual creation of such content and the unsolicited sharing of intimate content. So these are some examples of what's captured, but yeah, there are also other broader abuses that fall into this category. And the societal norms here and the stigmatization, along with the lack of technological mitigations that exist, are putting people at risk. And this particular research that I'm talking about focuses on proactive mitigation strategies against the non-consensual distribution of intimate content. So in this particular work, we investigated the context, the technologies, the threat models, and the defensive strategies that people used for sharing intimate content. So in this work, we conducted semi-structured interviews with 52 adults living in European countries that share intimate content for different purposes. So 28 of whom who shared for non-commercial purposes, and 24 who shared for commercial purposes and also non-commercial purposes in their personal life. And then 22 victim survivors of IBSA. So these are also, this includes participants from both of the above groups. Okay, so I'm going to do a very brief overview of our findings. So what we saw is that people share intimate content with, in a whole bunch of different contexts, so with strangers. For example, one of our participants shared intimate content on social media within a body positivity group. People also share intimate content in the context of new relationships, so with someone that they might just be starting to date, in established relationships, and also on commercial platforms like OnlyFans. And they also share in different structures. So commonly people might know one-to-one, such as in a direct message to a specific individual, or also one-to-many in the case where someone might be sharing one image repeatedly with different individuals, such as someone who is sharing content with multiple individuals they're interested in on a dating app, or one-to-a-group, such as a participant who shared that that she shared intimate content in a group of friends. So here's a quote. I've shared them with a lot of people. I've shared them with romantic partners. I've sent them to strangers on the internet, like on social media. Sometimes I search for people looking for intimate content and then just send them. And something we saw too is that there is a very wide range of platforms that are being used for intimate content, 40 plus that the participants explicitly mentioned. And a conclusion that we had is that any platform that can be used to create, share, and store intimate content is likely being used for it. So platforms do need to design for this as a use case. And we have this quote here. I've got like Telegram, I've got Signal, I've got WhatsApp, I've got Kik, you name it, I've got it. Occasionally, if there's something really large that requires drop boxes and that sort of thing, and I'll do that. So what are people concerned about? They are concerned about recipient threats, such as the non-consensual distribution of their intimate imagery by someone that explicitly received their intimate content, but they also care about these non-recipient threats that I'm going to breeze over for lack of time. And then what we did see in terms of strategies is that participants use a mix of technological strategies and also interpersonal strategies. And because of time, I'm not going to talk about these, but did want to show this landscape analysis that we conducted to just kind of demonstrate that the features that people mentioned using and wanting are not necessarily available in popular platforms, or they're just available in one specific mode, which is inconvenient for users. And because of these lack of technological strategies or features, they also use interpersonal strategies to fill in the gaps of what technology can offer. And a big takeaway here is that when sharing intimate content, participants were actually highly aware of the risks of doing so and the limitations of the existing technological defenses. So for example, they understood things like if they use screenshot notifications, there are ways to bypass those. And a concluding thing is that friction does matter here. People are not trying to do complete prevention, but rather, as this quote says, no matter how much features people put into safety, there's always going to be a risk. But as long as the features and the way you're doing it has a minimum level of safety, that will stop most people. Okay, sorry, just see what I have time left for. Okay, and what we also saw is that proactive protection is difficult. So participants critiqued themselves for not implementing enough behaviors and found it genuinely difficult to actually do all of the behaviors they wanted to. So we do conceptualize this as a form of victim blaming enacted by the absence of protective technological design, and find that it is critical to reallocate responsibility from individuals to platforms and technologists. So as this quote reads, everyone does it. It's part of how we sort of sexually express ourselves or make money. If something does happen and it does go badly, then you feel like, oh, well, everyone's just saying I shouldn't have done it. So somehow it's my fault, even though it's obviously not. Okay, I'm gonna end on some quick open questions. The first question is, can safety behaviors incentivize behaviors they seek to prevent? So an issue here, as this quote kind of alludes to, is that people do use certain features that offer things like ephemerality, but they might actually backfire and incentivize the behaviors they're seeking to prevent, as this quote says here, that it might actually invite people to hold onto things and try and screenshot. So there's more research that needs to be done on what are these contexts and how do we actually prevent these behaviors. And then participants also told us that they wanted privacy-preserving contact tracking, a way of being able to proactively see if their content was shared without their consent. But they also expressed concerns about attacks on these hashes or these hash-based methods for doing this privacy-preserving content tracking. And then the last question here is, how can we balance content control with harm documentation? So essentially, there are these features that do offer things like ephemerality, such as expiring messages, but people may also need to document exchanges and interactions in order to report things to a platform or to pursue legal action. So new design ideas should be explored to resolve this tension. And that is all. We built some wireframes and also created some user personas to try and demonstrate some of these user needs. So if you want to learn more about that, yeah.
That one. Working.
All right, hello everyone. I'm Tony Vance, and like many of you, I'm thinking about Ross today. I think his presence is here just by virtue of you being here. This conference being organized is one of the many ways he's influenced our field. And if you're curious, before he passed, just 2 weeks before he passed, he gave an 80-minute interview to an organization called Archives of IT, and he talked about his childhood and how he got into math and how he got into security from there, and finally how he got into academics. So I'll share it with the organizers if you're curious. So what I'm talking about is something I think is pretty interesting, and I'm doing it with my co-authors Santosh Srinivas and Michelle Lowry at Virginia Tech, where I am. And many of you know that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission in the United States, last year came out with new regulations for public companies around the world who are listed on U.S. stock exchanges. And some of you know that one of the requirements is that they have to disclose within 4 days of determining a security incident is material or consequential. You know about this rule if you heard about it. But I think another requirement of these new cybersecurity rules is something you may not be aware of, and that is there's a new section of the annual report. So the annual report is well known, it's very well formatted, and it doesn't change a whole lot. 25 years ago, Sarbanes-Oxley required some statement about internal controls and how management is in charge of those internal controls. And about 20 years ago, this item 1A was introduced where companies have to talk about various risks that their business faces and things that could impact them. And last year, this is Walmart's 10K for 2022. This is their 10K for the year 2023. And you see there's a whole section here devoted exclusively to cybersecurity. And every single public company that's listed on U.S. stock exchanges has to have this section. And it is not short. This one is 2 pages, Walmart's. And we're interested in what are companies saying in these messages, in these sections, and what impact are they going to have. So this just began a couple months ago in January. So far we've collected 4,600 of these, and they're continuing as companies regularly file their annual reports. So here's a few things. One of the things they're supposed to do in this report is to talk about how the company oversees cybersecurity risk management. How do they identify risks? How do they mitigate them? How do they respond to things? Many companies in these reports are talking about things like NIST or ISO 27001. I guess like you would expect that they would. But other things they need to mention are whether they have outside assessors like consultants or penetration testers or auditors, and how the company involves them. And also how they oversee specifically third-party risk like cloud storage providers. But another thing that's really interesting is governance. For example, boards of directors have to say specifically how they oversee cybersecurity risk, how they deal with it, how they're apprised of it. If there's a subcommittee like the audit committee or something else, if they're in charge of cybersecurity, then they have to explain that and how they keep abreast of all these developments. And then also there's the aspect of the chief information security officer or someone in management who's in charge of this, who has the ultimate responsibility. And one of the interesting things is they have to explain why they're qualified. They have to justify that, like their years of experience, their education, things like that. And they have to explain whether they talk to the board of directors. So many companies today have a chief information security officer, not all. Some just have a CIO. And for those that do have a chief information security officer, they're layered down, usually a couple layers down from the chief executive officer. And one of the interesting things about this requirement is that companies need to say, does your board of directors hear from your security person, CISO, on a regular basis? If so, describe that. So, of course, most companies don't want to say, no, we don't want to hear about this chief security officer. So now this is a de facto standard that has come about. This used to only be required by financial companies. Now all companies on public U.S. stock exchanges have to mention this. So we want to know things like, and we're digging into this, so we don't have hard numbers yet, but which companies are using boilerplate text, which are being really concrete, and why are they doing this? Some of these companies are being really specific about who is involved, who are on the committees, how often they meet, everything that's involved. Some companies are still rather vague, despite these requirements, maybe even a little evasive. And we're also looking to see how this is changing throughout the year. So this is unprecedented. There's no thing to go back and look at. What are companies saying about in their item 1C, because this is the first year it's been issued. So we're looking at how this is evolving throughout the reporting year and how this is going to change in the future. And then long term, we want to know about outcomes like whether this role is going to elevate the role of the chief information security officer. Because in the annual report, there was one person who is described, who is justified of why they're qualified, why they talk to the board or how often, and that's the chief information security officer. There's no one else that has this. And because they're named, if not explicitly, but the role is named, they're just having a lot of attention. And we want to see whether that elevates the role going forward. For example, whether reporting structures will change because of these new requirements. We want to know whether the things that companies are saying actually correlates with external scores like risk recon scores or BitSight scores that mention that somehow correlate the security posture of these companies with what companies are actually saying. Or is it just a whole lot of hot air? It doesn't really have any connection to what their security posture actually looks like. And then things like data breaches. Long term, we want to see, does what companies say, is it correlated with data breaches? And this year we actually have a useful example, and that is last week, this company, Live Nation, this is the parent company of Ticketmaster, the beloved ticketing organization. Well, last week, a hacking group put on sale 560 million user records on breach forums, charging $500,000. And you can see that there's a lot of personal information there. It's a one-time fee. So this went on sale last Tuesday. on Friday, Live Nation acknowledged it, and they're saying that they're looking into this. By the way, some snarky person on Twitter says that the hackers should charge $500,000 plus service and order processing fees. Gotta put that in there. It's pretty good. Take that to investors. Anyways, but what's helpful here is that Live Nation 2 months ago put out their item 1C, and they described that the board of directors is in charge of security, that they have a CISO. This person has 17 years, well, they say almost 20 years of work experience. And I read through their report, and it's one of the less specific item 1Cs. Maybe that's not surprising. And so going forward, we want to see, does this actually bear out empirically? Is there a correlation between what companies say and their actual security results? So this, you might think that there's really no consequence for what companies are saying here, but that's not the case. The SEC has gotten rather upset about security and the way that companies are rather nonchalant about how they deal with it. For example, SolarWinds, the company that had that epic hack a few years ago, last October, the SEC announced that they're suing SolarWinds and the Chief Information Security Officer specifically because of they were misleading investors with their statements about cybersecurity. So I think companies like Live Nation and others are going to have to reckon with this. Thanks.
You mean suing, you mean charging.
I meant sue, but yeah, they charge.
I thought they were charging him criminally.
Yeah,
Saying it's for fraud.
suing is, yeah.
Thanks.
I think both are happening.
So they say charge, and you can see their complaint, and it has that SEC is the plaintiffs and the SolarWinds the defendants.
He was prosecuted for fraud.
Yeah.
It's a criminal against the person.
Yeah, it's not civil, it's criminal.
Yes, it is
So
criminal.
that,
Thank you.
that's,
All right, questions, comments? Let's hand the way back.
So really great presentation. One thing I wanted to just point out is as you're looking at who's making decisions within an organization, I really want you to pay attention to consultants. The fundamental evil in all of cybersecurity
fundamental evil.
But this is the truth, right? So it's not that people want to do phishing exercises, right? But the government wants some kind of assessment and some guarantee that companies are actually investing in cybersecurity. And the best way to actually demonstrate that, or the most, the best, when I say best, I mean in a way that companies can actually transfer liability, is by bringing in one of the big fours to come. And these big fours have incredibly bad and what I would call stupid and asinine ideas of what should be done to improve cybersecurity. That includes things like phishing exercises. That includes things like doing role-based access control. Whether better access controls are available or not. So I think you're asked. So this is a comment for Jonas, right? Like when you're looking at the different stakeholders, I would also look at consultants. And then one quick comment for Tony. I think when you're looking at FICO and Excite, I think you should look at their own incentives to give people bad grades. Because there's a lot of kind of interesting marketing that these companies do where they give you bad scores until you buy their services.
Well,
Thanks.
Can
for
we-
that suggestion.
Is it like a discussion? Can I?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I think you're absolutely right. But the interesting thing is for Soups last year, we had an interview study and we included 7 C-level CISO consultants, and it was the first time, at least to our knowledge, that ever someone studied the consultants. The problem is they're hard to study because everything that comes out of their mouth is gold. So when you interview them and you really, it's only after that you realize that can't be true. So we, for example, asked them, how important is it in your job when you advise boards or CISOs, how important is the user? And they said 10 out of 10. And we said, oh, okay, so it's quite important. And only with the deeper questions, we kind of got the idea they have no clue. So I feel like, I think you're right, but they're really good. And so with our methods, there's a limit, because if we rely on what they're saying, yeah, you know what I mean? They are hard to study. But you're right.
Please.
Thanks. Great presentations, especially Anthony Vance or Alexander Kummer. So just wanted to pick up on the new SEC rule and the new 10K specification. I think part of this and part of your, I'd be very interested to hear more about your study, but also how that compares to what's going to happen now with Network Information Security Directive number 2 in the Article 20 component, which is exactly the same as the 106K rule that now the SEC specifies in terms of board have to prove that he's been adequately appraised.
Is that in Europe?
Yes, the European Union's Network Information Security Directive. Right? So all that I think is kind of interesting also because it is clearly going to try to shift risk in a big way away from what the risk, what we expect to call the risk society of the individual, right, to something that is more accountable or more grabbable. But one of the problems I heard on the SEC was that even though it's fairly specific, there's clear guidelines of what a material breach might constitute. We have no guidelines for what is the adequately aware. How does the board prove it's adequately aware and adequately appraised of cyber risk? So we do have numbers for what a material breach might know, but we don't know what adequately appraised, or we can give you the exact phrasing in a minute, but effectively what that would mean. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I just think it's a new area. It's nascent. The guidelines are nebulous, and the item 1C, what I described to you, there's basically an outline of what should be in there, but there's so much variation because companies are just figuring this out. They're literally figuring this out this calendar year, and they're doing it as well with things like awareness and materiality and things like that. So it's just kind of fun to watch this develop. But well, I'm sure it's not as fun to actually write these things and implement them.
I have a question for Lucy. When I'm looking at the sharing of content, are you paying attention to whether users believe their content is anonymous or if it can be identified? Because I feel like the behaviors will be different if the user believes it's an anonymous picture versus if their face is shown.
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually a lot of users, more than 50%, or participants, more than 50% actually said that they spent a lot of time removing identifying features, so like their faces, tattoos, anything else that's potentially identifying. So anonymity did really matter to them, and anonymity also mattered in other contexts. So some people wanted to use platforms like Kik, where it's not necessarily associated, I believe, to your phone number. So there are a lot of different contexts in which anonymity was very important and actually one of the most important features for somebody, but that did differ depending on the use cases. So, yeah.
So Andrew.
I'm driving from Major University and follow up again for Lucy. I really did like that work and the categorization you've got of the different types and purposes of intimate material is very good. But I think you were missing one element, which was the force but no in production. And this is not just with, obviously child sexual abuse material, which I realise you shied away from in this work, but there is also forced stuff with adults, and that was a big thing on YouPorn a couple of years ago. There was material on there which wasn't child sexual abuse material, but was forced material from within domestic abuse situations, for example. So I think there is another category there that you've missed, and it's a really important one to consider, partly because it's when you have somebody expressing apparent consent to the distribution of this, there's a question of whether it actually is real informed consent.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think the non-consensual creation of this intimate content is also a huge problem. Yeah, so the scope of this particular study really was just on the non-consensual distribution piece of consensually created content. So we did only talk to people who talked about consensually creating this content. But absolutely agree with you that this is definitely something that the research community should be looking more at.
Ben.
Hi, my question follows on from that. Lucy, really great presentation and really interesting work. I was wondering if anything emerged within the study about different groups of adversaries, I guess, because it seems that you obviously do have a lot of this sort of people who are sharing things necessarily in a fairly unorganized way, but also big communities that are very organized, scrape through sites, scrape through channels to try and find this content, distribute it in a sort of much more organized malicious way. So I was wondering if that came out from your user study at all, if they were aware of this?
Actually, I think only maybe one or two people mentioned these types of, like more organized types of non-consensual distribution. So I think maybe what you're referring to is the people who collect these maybe in repositories and share them in other channels like Telegram or maybe Reddit forums. So I think only one or two people had mentioned that that was something that they were actually concerned about, and concerned about their content if they had posted it to social media being kind of scraped up into these repositories. I think we did not explicitly ask people this question either, but my guess is that maybe for a majority of them, they actually are not aware that this is a mode of distribution.
Richard.
So along the same lines, the same presentation, which all the presentations were really good. Did you try to assess the harm that was done? I mean, one could imagine that this ranges all the way from a mild embarrassment to when you hear of people committing suicide or attempting suicide after a release like this. It could be economic loss, like I was trying to sell those pictures and now I can't do that because they're freely available. Is that something, because that seems like an important variable.
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we did speak with 22 victim survivors, and that data was not analyzed as part of this paper that I talked about, but we did talk to the victim survivors, and there is, even for those who are not victim survivors, there is a broad range of concern. Like you mentioned, the economic aspect is definitely one piece of it. We did speak with sex workers who did say, well, this is a financial loss for me. But there are others who did talk about being embarrassed with their friends or their family members, but others who did fear that if this image is released, or if an image is released, I might lose my job, or there might be other types of consequences. And so there's definitely a range of concern, and I think that also differs based on the other experiences of marginalization that someone might have, or perhaps the cultural context they're in. We did talk to someone who said their home country is one that is maybe less tolerant of these types of images and had heightened concerns because of that.
I'm going to stop and ask a question for Bonnie. I've been to channel Adam Shostak, who is not here yet. He would talk about security warnings being actionable, that a warning is useful if the user has to do something based on the information being given. And my question is having a warning where I, as a user, have to make a decision based on something I know, put me in some kind of different brain state than having to click OK, I've read it. And is that worth thinking about?
That's a really good question, because most of the time that is what we do. We click, okay, I acknowledge that you warned me to do this thing, or I choose to accept the risk, or to proceed, or no, I don't want to accept it. Yeah.
Tyler, and then we'll go to Simpson. Tyler.
So mine's for Bonnie and or Tony as well. So it's interesting, you've got this study where you're comparing similar warnings and people's responses to it. My question is, your response variable that you're tracking is putting people in an fMRI and seeing what their neurological response is. But I would imagine that you'd also could see what effect people would respond to similar warnings versus non-warning dialog boxes. You could measure how often they click through and accept. There's lots of different ways in which you could measure this effect, and I'm curious if you could talk about what you get from looking at studying the fMRI data that you wouldn't get from some of these other measures, or just kind of how it compares in terms of what you would see when collecting other ways of measuring this effect.
I think one of the things we're trying to do is to show that people actually read the message and process the language instead of clicking without reading. That they're, instead of relying on memory, and that's one of these key things on the habituation, right, is that our brain thinks it looks similar enough to what we've seen before. Without actually reading it, we just click OK, hoping that it's the thing that we have seen before, which is not always the case. And so that's one of the problems. That's why we're doing some of these other tools instead, is to try to prove that we are actually processing and that it is distinct. And that's why that if we trigger enough for your brain to say, actually look at this, read it for real, don't rely on memory that it's close enough to what we've seen before, then there may be different language that says, no, this one is different, and you do need to take this seriously. It's and that's why making it enough of a difference, whether you have to slide a thing, then that triggers you into treating it as a new different thing.
Also, why you need to look at their brain activity.
If I may add to that really fast. So we did measure it also behaviorally in the field. So we did it in the lab with fMRI and in the field. And we measured that in terms of did they dismiss it or not, or how quickly they dismiss it. And like Bruce was saying, we use different ways of responding, like a slider to drag across to see if it would break this mental frame that we have, because we're just all trained to click to dismiss stuff. And whether that one act of dragging the slider over, would that be enough to get people to think about what they're doing more? So anyways, the reason why we did fMRI is to see that generalization actually was happening. Some of our reviewers said, well, how do you know that people are just getting better at responding? They're better at the task. Okay. And we could say, well, we have brain data. We can show that generalization is really happening. That's one of the reasons.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Simpson.
Yeah, thanks. Another question on the images. You talked on this exclusively about still frames, and I wanted to know if your study looked at video, because there's different issues associated with that.
Yes. So yeah, by intimate content, that also includes video. I think more people naturally just talked about still images, but this did actually include video as well. Yeah.
Hi. Excellent presentations, everybody. I've got a question for Bonnie. This is a bit of a conceptual, theoretical question, and specifically what I'm wondering is whether, as a part of your study, you considered desire. So the thing about habituation and generalization is that it seems to me to be sort of like a lack of desire. There's kind of, or really what the user is kind of desiring is what comes after the habitual task, right? It's getting to the site that you want to go to or whatever it is. And so what you guys all seem to have done in your study is to figure out how you can design the interface so that the user kind of points their desires more at the notification box. It kind of interrupts that sort of habitual flow towards something else. So I'm wondering, I guess, if there was any way that you conceptualized it firstly, and whether it was something that could be measured, or if that was something that was explicitly a part of your model. I guess that's what I'm interested in.
I don't think we considered that really about the desire. It's more of we don't even realize what our brains are doing. We think that we are in charge of what we're doing, that we don't realize that our brains are more efficient, that we think we're thinking, and our brain's like, no, I'm in charge of what you're doing. I'm more efficient than you know. And yeah, but that would be an interesting.
Yeah, just because I think all of the talks so far have talked about sort of users being problematic and how that's a problematic thing. Is to consider users to be the problem, because not only are their habits problematic, but their desires that lead to the habituation is also problematic. And so kind of interrupting, the usability seems to be really connected to reconceptualizing the user as more than just a kind of stimulus response machine, which is kind of what you guys are looking at, I think.
Yeah, and ours is, we're not trying to be user blamers. Yeah. We're trying to be, your brain is doing its best. It is so efficient, and you don't even know what it's doing on your behalf. And let's get the software to work in accordance with how your brain is doing it, instead of trying to train you around what your brain is doing for you.
It's really lower than the level of desire or motivation. For example, there's a sound of the hum of this computer over here. If you're close to the front, you can hear it, but only if you stop and focus on it. But you just didn't know it was there because your brain just tuned it out.
Now we all hear it or know it, thanks.
Yeah, it's not like, it doesn't matter how motivated you are or conscientious or trained, our brains just tune things out.
I have 1, 2, 3. Listen.
This is a question for Marc. So you mentioned briefly kind of like the shield lock issue. And I was curious if you all did any research on overgeneralization of the lock. And what I mean is, great, I'm talking one-on-one with this person, it's end-to-end encrypted. That doesn't mean they're not a scammer.
they can't share my content somewhere else, blah, blah, blah. And in fact, because it's end-to-end encrypted, I presume, although correct me if I'm wrong, that I have fewer reporting options. So I was curious if that came up, or if you could speak whatever you could share.
Sure, thanks. It's a great question. We actually didn't set off to, but we ended up doing a lot of work on this because we found that I actually had a slide in the appendix that said something, while the lock is the best fit, it's imperfect. And so on the slide I did show, there was a bit of text that said the lock plus explainer text is really important. So and this isn't about the lock specifically and how it relates to end-to-end encryption, but iconography throughout the UI, we think about it as like it can help bring the user to the right neighborhood of the concept that they should be in, but it's not going to deliver the specific meaning that they need to know. So throughout the experience, in some places it will just be the lock, where either we have very limited real estate in the interface, or all we need the user to know is some basic idea of heightened privacy security, where in other places we're delivering what we talk about as admin text or content that will give an explanation of specifically what privacy affordance is that lock signaling. Or for your example, can you still report this conversation, and then hopefully pointing the user toward how to do that. One other specific example I'll raise, I don't know if anyone has gone through this experience yet if you happen to use Messenger, but one of the ways that you now can protect your message history, one way, is with a PIN code. One of the very interesting things we found, especially in certain markets, is that people associated the lock and then the PIN code experience with meaning that the PIN code locks or unlocks individual chats, which is not what's happening at all. And that was actually one of our largest UX hurdles to try to overcome, because that was causing some concern. Some people liked that idea, but that's not what the feature of end-to-end encryption actually does. So there were a lot of ways we tested and iterated on the lock and how we're supporting it with additional admin text.
Another one for Bonnie, which really follows on your question. And I'm wondering what the thing secured you're after is. What does security refer to in your model? What's the thing being secured?
So when we talk about security message versus non-security notifications, it's actually pretty broad at this point. Any sort of overreach even at this point. So we have friendly notifications, but we've broadened it so anytime there's a macro download, that we consider a security notification. Or when it wants you to ask for your location, we consider that a security notification.
Okay, but what's the thing you're being secured?
The secure behavior we're seeking.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. I'm curious why the thing that one is seeking security in your model isn't the person and their actions, right? So all of these notifications that we can measure with fMRI disrupt something that's happening, right? The thing that people actually care about is no longer occurring, right? They're notified, they have to distract themselves from the thing that they desire to do. That's what's actually valuable here, right? And why isn't that the referent of security in this model? That seems like the thing that matters, right?
I am sorry, I'm not 100% getting your question.
You need to say what that is. You elided the that. You said that's
the desire, the user's desire to do some particular thing.
Their task, their goal of the current task. That's what you're saying.
So we're not trying to. So that's really important, and we're not cheerleaders for warnings. It's more like they're a necessary evil in some cases, and we want to make sure that they're effective when they must be used. Not that they should be used all the time, and not that we should put a greater onus on the user. We're just merely pointing out that users' brains work against them in how they respond to warnings. And so if you as a developer need someone to respond to a message and you want to make that message count, then you need to take their biology into account.
Frank, your last comment.
Yes, sorry to keep on insisting on Bonnie and Tony. And this is, unless it comes from something that Angela Sasser wrote with her then PhD student Adam Buchanan 17 years ago. Was the year of the first SHB, the paper called The Compliance Budget, which said, people will be willing to listen to security advice and warnings and so on up to a certain point. If you piss them off, they will just stop doing it. They will find workarounds and ignore all that stuff. And so, in your advice to people who are preparing those warnings, how to make the warnings effective, do you give them a sense to prioritize them, to say, well, you only have so many you can issue before people will stop complying anyway? Did you give them any ways, any hints, any suggestions on how to say, well, restrict yourself to only that many? And do you observe any of that in the fMRI, that people are just switching off?
Well, and that's the problem I think that we've seen is people are told all the time, oh, you have to be hyper vigilant, and we have the phishing tests that go out to companies, right, the employees, and oh, you're stupid if you fall for the phishing, and that people get overwhelmed and are fearful and they fall for things because they look similar to the message that we're getting all the time. And so that's our whole goal is, yes, you're going to miss these because they look a lot like what you've already seen. And it's like a new driver is hyper vigilant and they get exhausted. I've got 2 16-year-old daughters right now that we're working on getting their hours in, and it's killing all of us. And eventually I've got a 20-year-old daughter, and she just misses half the stuff because she doesn't care because she's habituated to it. But when she hears a siren, like, she's in tune. And so that's the state we're trying to get to, more of the 20-year-old driver that knows when to worry instead of the 16-year-old driver that's anxious all the time. And so that's the goal of what we're trying to do. So when it's important, and you're not hypersensitive, but you're not, my 80-year-old mom who misses the important things, right? And figuring out how our brains work. Let's use that knowledge to get the security warnings level of alertness kind of at the right, the Goldilocks zone. And I know we've talked with Angela over the years, and I remember even at Cambridge University back in, about 2014, 15, whatever year we were there, that, we don't want to threaten our users on security, but finding that Goldilocks spot.
Well, I think we have to close this. Well, everything else at the break. Thank you, speakers. So next year we expect Facebook Messenger users in FRMI scanners and see what they do.
That'll be fun. Yeah, that's right.
So we're going to meet back here at the top of the hour on time. If you're in the next session, please put your slides